Hey, what's up, guys? Let's talk about emulators and why they're so hard to play on PCs. Now, emulators, they look at it this way: it's a whole OS running, and it doesn't know your drivers, it doesn't know your optimization of your GPU on your PC. It primarily runs on RAM. So, you always, even if you have really good PC, you are going to get stuttering in the mobile games, and when you download the PC games, they just run better. I have Zentless Zone Zero, which is a high demanding PC game that I downloaded for PC on the Legion Go, and I'm getting better performance than the PlayStation 5. Okay, so this thing is good. Um, but most PCs, what they don't understand, what AMD understands. And I'll tell you what this is. Most PCs want to make more powerful energy consumption processors. Now, what AMD has done is they've optimized the processor with what's already there because they understand two things. The people working at AMD understand scaling. It's simple. They understand scaling image ratio, and they understand what frames are. They understand how OpenGL graphics is, triple buffering, VSync, anti-aliasing. They just understand the software aspects of that. So they've implemented the software aspects of that into their hardware, which is their processor that was for the Legion. Now, this processor isn't a super heavy processor. It's really not. It's like a hybrid of a Snapdragon processor, which is very good for mobiling. But then they added this frame rates and scaling, and frame rates through scaling. So this is why on this device, you will be able to emulate at really good frames per second. Now, we're going to have to climb a mountain with this. It's going to be more of like a hill because there's things in here that people don't understand. They don't understand what AMD understands with how they're optimizing their device. So that leads to issues still. If you open an emulator on your Legion, it's not going to perform how you want it to perform. That's because you need to get AMD to understand the scaling situation and you have to allocate VRAM and stuff appropriately. And what I'm going to say right now, guys, if you think your emulator is going to run better with putting the Legion into BIOS and giving it 6 gigs of VRAM, you're wrong. You're actually going to make your game run worse because the game is just going to be assuming that it's running on a very high-end PC, which it's not. The Legion Lenovo is a well-optimized mobile device running Windows. So if you just give it more RAM, if you give it more VRAM, you're going to get actually worse performance. It's just going to eat all of that up. It's not going to care, and it's not going to give you more frames per second, okay? So all we have to do is download an emulator. I would recommend 2 emulators, but BlueStacks wins, okay? Now, BlueStacks is either really good or really bad, but because it has options, we can actually use and tweak the options within the robust BlueStacks options to give AMD the opportunity to use its technology, its super resolution, okay? Because the super resolution on AMD is not fully recognizing this. This is an emulator basically just running off disk space, disk speed, and RAM. So if you give that emulator more RAM, it's going to start using more of your disk speed. It's not going to optimize graphically at all. Okay, so let's just get into this after I've explained this, because now you know what we're trying to do to solve the problem and why we're going to have a huge edge when it comes to getting emulators to run on PC. Okay, so I would say with this new technology, if you like emulators and you want to content create, record video with emulators, I'm going to recommend you, affordability wise, get the AMD processor, because this thing is going to be crazy in the future. It's going to be cheaper, more cost effective than Nevada GeForce and stuff like that, but you're going to get probably some better performance in certain aspects of the game. So I've ranted enough. I've cooked enough. So you need to go into your BIOS. That 8 gigs of RAM that you set for VRAM, you need to take that back down a notch, because mobile games aren't using VRAM. They're using the optimized processor, and they're using just the 4 gigs of RAM. Like, even if you have a Red Magic 9S with the 16 gigs, that game is probably just going to use the same amount of 4, 5, 6 gigs out of the 16, okay? And if you boost your resolution, you're not making use of any of your Legion Go at all. Because the Legion Go, the only way you're going to get the frames is if you keep your resolution at a mobile resolution, and then you can actually upscale it and get the frames per second, okay? So that's the first step you need to do right now. Go ahead and do that, and then keep watching this video, okay? Because I'm telling you now that's a bad idea, and I've done multiple instances and recorded multiple videos, and you'll get worse results. You'll go up here while you're running the game, and you'll see that all of your VRAM is going to be at like 96% when just running the emulator. Your disk space is going to be used, and all your RAM is going to be used. And what happens is that's going to overbearing the AMD technology, so it's not going to give you your FreeSync. It's not going to give you like your super resolution. It's not going to give you your good stuff that you want from there. So we're going to have your super resolution enabled. I've tweaked with the sharpness. It doesn't matter. It looks better, but it doesn't hinder performance. It does hinder performance if you download a PC game. You're going to keep your fluid motion on. You can have anti-lag. Go ahead and open triple buffering at the bottom here, because triple buffering is something that this emulator does have with it. All this other stuff, even if you're adjusting texturing, again, that's for PC stuff. You don't want to do that. It'll make your mobile game run way worse. You'll get like 15 frames per second by some of these optimizations. So we're going to go ahead and have this setting on. I went ahead and added the game that I want, which is really just going to open BlueStacks when I push this. So we're going to show you the next step is the configuration of BlueStacks. So I'm going to go to the app player on BlueStacks. I'm going to go ahead and close this. Settings. Let me show you settings that they have in BlueStacks, because this is very important, okay? I enabled 6 cores. You can have 4 cores enabled. You can have up to you can have 8 gigs. You can even have custom gigs of RAM. But I'm telling you now that it's going to overload the AMD, what AMD is trying to do on its end. It does not give it more stability. you can have it at high performance, and you can have 60 frames here. Again, AMD does not recognize that frame generation. When you hit that 60 frames per second, you're actually going to get like 30 because it's going to be too much for the system. So you'll hit 50 frames per second, okay? And there's a huge conflict in these drivers where when you are running your game, you'll put your frames per second on and it'll show you like 120, but you're actually getting 30 when you actually turn on the refresh rate for BlueStacks. You're actually just getting 30. You need to the resource management. You need to balance them. Okay, so these are the settings you're going to use. You're going to use the 4 gigs of RAM, the cell phone amount. You're going to hit high performance. You can hit 4 or 6 gigs. I saw no difference, but after 6 and 8 on this device, I just saw more consumption of the GPU, but I didn't see any difference. So keep it on these settings here, guys. Do not enable high frame rates, and do not enable VSync. Don't enable that. A mobile device like a Red Magic Pro 9 is going to be running at 16 by 90. Keep it at that, okay? If you increase the resolution of this, it's just going to use the emulator is going to use all your RAM, and AMD isn't going to recognize those resolutions to give you higher frames. It's important for AMD, your Legion, to recognize the resolution to upscale its performance. Okay, that's very important. So you're going to have this at 6090. Do not change the DPI to high, because at the 1080p resolution, if you're recording video on a phone at 60 frames per second, and the phone's resolution is naturally 16 by 90, that's only using 240 DPI, okay? High is for the higher resolutions, like 2K, 4K resolutions, which your phone doesn't support anyways. And that's if you have a high-end desktop PC. Don't do that. Okay, so performance, display, graphics, you can hit OpenGL, Vulkan, all DirectX, all this stuff is for like desktop computers. You're really not going to see a difference. I've messed with these and ran multiple instances of the game. This beta, software encoding, hardware encoding, disable it. It's not going to help at all. And then you're going to run your game at the, you're going to hit full screen, okay? So I just saved changes. Let me go ahead and launch the game now. Before you put it in full screen, make sure this is maxed, okay? This resolution has to be maxed. If it's at this or this, your super resolution and your refresh rate thing isn't going to recognize it. It has to be on max. Hit that toggle there. Hit full screen. I'm going to show you the two different performances. When you're not running this optimally and you're using too much GPU power, you're going to see that the FPS of the game is going to be like 15 or 20 or 40 maybe. And you're going to see that the FPS up here on the top left is going to be like 120. I set my frames per second to 50. And then I'm going to let AMD recognize resolution and improve on that. And I will get 60 locked pretty much frames per second. So this isn't 50 frames per second, that is 60 plus frames per second, okay? If it's too much frames per second, AMD cannot optimize it properly. So this is showing the true frames per second now. There's no conflict. This is actually going to be the extra refresh rates. Okay, so with these mobile games, if you don't do what I told you to do when you get into an instance, it's going to take up a lot of CPU and all that stuff when you start playing the game. When you get into populated areas, I'm going to show you a populated area where we will get very good frames per second. Plus, I'm recording this video, and you're going to see the performance. So this is a game called Aether Gazer that I really like. This is going to stutter at the beginning. There we go. Now the emulator will say being run at 30-40 frames per second, but what's happening is AMD, as you can see, it's clearly running a lot smoother than that. AMD is actually utilizing its technology. So don't pay attention to the bottom FPS, pay attention to the top. And I'm going to slow down some of these instances, guys, in this fight right now to show you the actual frames. Because if you are just running this thing at a couple frames, you know, like 30, you're not going to be able to utilize... You're going to see that it's just like really bad, right? So because this thing is running and I'm recording it at a higher frames per second, AMD has really optimized this really well. It's recognized everything. I'm going to slow down some of the instances and show you guys the gameplay after this. So that way you guys can actually see that it was performing. And maybe I can compare it to my mobile gaming device. So maybe I'll do a side-by-side.